This is our final segment here on the program, Jones and Company, and it's always good to have Mr. GowonBowe here today, who fields questions extremely well, even though some of these are off-the-wall extraneous questions. Godfrey?
Mr. Bowe, at the recent World Bank meeting, IMF World Bank meeting in Bali, they talk about the human capital index. You familiar with that? The Bahamas was not even included. Why do you think that was the case?
Sadly, that's partly to do with our Department of Statistics and our information gathering aspect. So that's one where we just are purely not collating information to submit. The second one is that when you look at some of the sustainable goals that are attached to that index, we are actually not implementing the strategies that were agreed in previous meetings in relation to that. And so there are a number of conventions and a number of objectives that have been agreed relative to it. And when we look at the quality of life, if you want to look at it in that regard, I would say that the average Bahamian in reality is doing quite well relative to a number of countries' peers. Our quality and standard of living is actually superior, particularly in the Caribbean, when we look at it in that regard. However, we are not, that has been because of the grace of God, as opposed to our national development and plan. And I think that we oftentimes in one breath want to be seen as a third world country. So we don't have the obligations, but we want to live the lifestyle of a first world country. And I think we have to decide what it is we want to be. And I can tell you, as far as I'm concerned, the Bahamas is a first world country. We are just, if you will, undersized in this ring that we call the global arena. And so when we punch, we have to punch far above our weight, but we do it at various points. We just don't sustain it. So in sports and sometimes in financial services.
It depends on how you qualify a first world country, what yardstick you use. Because many years ago, Mr. Bowe, a first world country was really a developed country. We are a developing country. And so developing countries can't be first world countries.
Well, but I would say that's your mindset. The one thing I credit my grandmother and my grandfather with is they say poverty is a state of mind, you know. And when you look at the quality of life and you say a developing country, is there
Australia, for instance,
calls itself
a developing country. Well, New Zealand is a developing country.
Canada too.
Well, they use that term loosely, and they use that for the benefit of various initiatives when they look at funding, grants, and everything else. But if we stop and say some of the key things, is there a more advanced airport than our Lyndon Pinling International Airport? Took us many years, but we have it. We have ports, whether it be in Freeport with the container port or APD in New Providence. Our road infrastructure, whilst it may have cost one government the election, as in New Providence, certainly advanced. And you look at Grand Bahama, although requiring immediate repair and attention, was first world even before New Providence was, in terms of a planned city. We have the challenge of being the archipelagic nation, where it is not the same standard in every island. And sometimes, whilst it is harsh to do this, and this is not me discounting my brothers and sisters in the family islands, it is, when you look at countries around the world that have rural territories, they are different. And what is most important is understanding how to provide a high quality of life in that environment. So understanding how you use renewable energy as opposed to trying to run cabling into it. How do you take advantage of the water levels in those environments as opposed to trying to run main lines? It is looking at the frequency of transport that comes in and out, but having consistency, so there's reliability on the supply and demand that is taking place.
Yeah,
and
like-
again, we are haphazard.
Yeah, like the constant supply of electricity.
Well, and that's why.
And the quality of the electricity
But,
that
you
we
know,
have.
running underwater cable versus saying that I will develop a plant that is with all the solar equipment. You know, I was in Cayman and speaking with, there was an investor that was in Peru where they were running the solar panels and it was the flooring. And so it was roads running over it. It was an infrastructure that took a rural area and it had acres, thousands of acres, just with the solar panels in order to energize the rural area.
Yeah. When do you really see this economy turning around?
Without a bump?
Yeah.
Because I think each time we think you are saying you're feeling you're on the glide pattern to that rise, there's something that causes a stumble. So whether it be external forces or whether it be our own initiatives that are not really plotted out over the long term, so people don't have a full appreciation for when it'll take place. And I only use that because I think NHI, the tact is right in terms of saying you get what you pay for, and so there needs to be a mechanism to raise funds for it. I think the approach is much to be desired in terms of saying, well, we should treat this as a program-based initiative, all assets in one set of balance sheet, the liabilities, and then the revenues, whether it be through government subvention or direct taxes, are there and accounted. And I only use that as an example.
Yeah. So you would have a little difficulty with the model being proposed?
Only because now, one, I don't know how the numbers work because they've only thrown the numbers out without the costing and saying, this is what I project the cost and this is what I project to be the revenue coming in by this tax structure. And I've also considered what impact it's going to have on employment because whilst this is one, someone asked me the other day, like, why did I use the term? It was a clandestine increase in minimum wage. And you may say, what do I mean by that? Whilst it sounds good to say that 2% to a person who's only earning $10,000, so just around the minimum wage level, they're only paying $200. They're saying the annual premium is still $1,000, and the employer has to pick up $800. In that scenario, whether intentional or not, you've just forced the employer to increase the wages of the person who's on minimum wage.
Yeah, but can the market bear it?
And that's the part I'm saying, that's a clandestine increase in minimum wage.
And
we have to be very, very careful that does not then mean, because employers will tell you, I have a budget for salary. Whether that covers 100 people or 80 people, this is the budget that I have for salary. And so don't make a mistake in believing that there's, if you will, the appetite or the capacity to simply take on more expenses. As you said, a lot of businesses are saying they have absorbed losses for many years because of the good times of the past, but they are reaching a point where they can no longer do so and they have to get back to profitability. So to your real point in saying, well, when do I see it turning around? I think we are on a upward trajectory. And what I don't want to see is government either blindly or intentionally damaging that upward trajectory. And they have to appreciate, as Sir Winston Churchill said, trying to tax your way out of debt is like standing in a bucket and trying to lift yourself up. Do not weigh down the economy that you need to rise in order to get yourself out of it.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Bowe. Thank you for your attendance here today. And
Short notice.
we learn every time you come. Thank you so very much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Godfrey.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching and listening to our program today. Good evening, everyone.